AP students, we are moving forward here, talking about how banks decide how much money the Federal Reserve, sorry, how much money they should allow banks to loan out, how much more money. So we're going to look at we're going to call it the money multiplier effect. Before we get to that, though, just real quick, and you're following along with these notes, you'll see how they go. We're going to get through in this video through the money multiplier. And anyway, so that's where we're headed. You can follow along as you go. However you've been doing that, keep up the good work, and we'll get through it. So the first thing, like I said, is we're going to look at some interest rates. Just a real simple concept that's kind of a random thing to talk about with where we're at, but it does have to do with banking. So both a borrower and a seller can benefit from interest rates, and know if you can expect a certain amount of inflation, which is what banks do. Then you can kind of shop around and get a better rate, which it really doesn't mean anything for you and I. We're going to shop around for the lowest interest rate anyway. But maybe it does motivate us or incentivize us to borrow money when maybe we wouldn't have before. So a formula you got to remember here is pretty simple. This nominal minus expected inflation equals the real interest rate. Okay, so keep in mind, a bank needs to set that inflation rate or that interest rate at least equal with inflation, because if you're going to pay back with equal payments over the course of a loan, that money's going to become less and less valuable over time. Okay, so a typical question you might be asked is, figure out what the real interest rate is in these different situations. And so we're going to apply this nominal minus expected, okay, equals the real interest rate, okay, and we can figure this out. I have it a little bit out of order here, halfway on purpose, because again, the test situation may not put it in order from you. So nominal minus expected equals real. Nominal minus expected here is -2. All right, percent. And nominal minus, so we get the final answer here. So this expected inflation is going to be 5%. Okay, so nominal minus real, nominal minus expected equals real. Notice here, negative interest rates, the borrower benefits. Okay, so borrower benefits, I already filled in borrower. We had the real interest rate here. Okay, here is the lender. Okay, or loaner as I have it written up there. Okay, simple concept. We'll practice it with the MyAP stuff. Um, you just got to kind of remember that formula. Okay, moving forward here, I'm writing some vocab words for you, not because we haven't talked about them, but maybe we haven't written them down. Which again, sometimes the AP test gives you some words we don't really focus on too much. Understand there is a difference between income and wealth. So income is money that I've earned. Usually we can look at it like within a year, right? What's your salary? 50,000 a year, $1 million a year, whatever that is. That's money I earn from doing work. Now, wealth is a little bit different. So like Warren Buffett has an extraordinary amount of wealth. He has assets in the form of stocks. I don't know too much about the guy, but I know that he owns a bunch of shares of probably a bunch of different companies. Berkshire Hathaway is probably the biggest that he owns a bunch of shares in, but that's not really cash. It's not his month. That's not his yearly income. Okay, so that is his wealth. Your wealth comes in the form of assets. We've mentioned that word before. Assets come in the form of a whole lot of things. Real estate stocks are real common. You could throw gold in there. You could throw Michael Jordan rookie cards in there, whatever that is, things that I can turn into cash. Okay. Liabilities, that's a financial obligation that I have. So that means I've got to pay somebody back. Okay. Businesses and governments, this is what I have from a loan, right? Businesses and government is also included in that. Liquidity of assets, how easily can I turn them into cash? Notice, stocks and gold are much easier to turn into cash because everybody's going to accept those things, or a lot of people are going to accept those things. Baseball cards, cars, I've got to find somebody to really like those things to accept those and give me cash for them. So the easier it is to sell stuff, the more liquid they are. Okay. There's some other terms for financial assets, loans. I can loan people money. if I wanted to legally, right? And again, people do that with businesses. Sometimes that's called a bond. Okay, so there's a bond market. We're familiar with the stock market. There's a bond market as well. And if you're a super successful business, sometimes you borrow money from people rather than banks, in terms of to get maybe a little bit of a better interest rate on your payments. So again, we can have assets in these ways. Loans are usually banks, but an individual could lend money as well. Bonds, like I said, mostly done with businesses. We can also do that with the government, and then we can also own part of the company where we can sell part of it. Those are obviously stocks. Okay, money has three pretty simple, well, I don't know if they're simple, but three functions. It has to. So if our money is going to have value, okay, we have to have people accept it. All right, pretty straightforward. Our dollar bill, people accept it. It's not anything that we are unfamiliar with. It's got to have an easy way to show how valuable it is, right? So again, it's got to be divisible. It's got to be like a $100 bill has to be divisible into smaller chunks, so I can use a $100 bill to buy a tank of gas or whatever, right? So I've got to be able to divide it. I've got to be able to know how valuable it is, and I've got to be able to save it for future use. Okay, so pretty simple things. Sometimes you hear those terms, pretty easy to wrap our heads around. Two types of money historically, okay, and again, commodity money. If you read the article about ramen noodles in like prison, so prisons have a challenge of a dollar bill in prison doesn't do any good because it never leaves, right? So if a dollar bill goes into the prison, like it kind of stays there. There's going to be constant inflation, and so prisons kind of face the conundrum of a currency, um, that it doesn't stay scarce. So, like for example, if you watch old movies, like cigarettes were huge commodities in prison because they stay scarce. People use them, people consume them, they smoke them, and they stay scarce, right? Historically, gold stayed scarce because it was hard to get out of the ground, right? So those are things they have to be able to. They have to run out. Now, we use what we refer to as fiat money, where the government just says it's valuable. Okay, so the government says, you know what, if you have a debt, you can use this dollar bill to pay that debt off. Okay, and so since we can do that, other places accept that as income, and we can exchange money for any types of good or service that we run into. All right, but again, there's no guaranteed value of our dollar bill. It used to be backed by gold, not the case anymore. Okay, so anyway, there's no necessarily value, that the government says that if you trade this in, you get something for. That's not necessarily the case. Okay, so we're going to look at what we refer to as the money multiplier today. It's going to refer to, um, how much a bank and how much that money can turn into, extra income or extra loan, withdrawals for other people. Okay, so know the terms that a bank's going to use. We have the required reserves. We talked about those with our strategies back with Federal Reserve policy, right? We also have excess reserves. This is money that banks can loan out. Okay, and so again, if I have $100 in a bank and the reserve requirement is $10, right? I'm sorry, 10%. I can loan out 90. My required is 10. So we've talked about that. If you've been watching the videos, it should be pretty straightforward. Okay, just to give it to you kind of in a problem form. If a bank has $200,000 in deposits at a 10% reserve requirement, how much money would the bank be allowed to loan out? Okay, how much do they have to keep on reserve? Well, they have to require reserve 20,000. That's 10%, right? Figure that out. And then our excess reserves are going to be 180,000. All right. So if we can change that number again, remember that if we lower that reserve requirement, we're going to be able to loan out more money. That is going to decrease interest rates. And if you're unfamiliar with how to answer the bottom part of this question, watch the previous video. We go over that. Okay, so here's what we're going to try to eventually show with our money multiplier. Okay, so to start things off, we have this person named Noah, right? And he deposits $100 into a bank. Keep our numbers easy. We've got a 10% reserve requirement. The bank has to keep 10, but can loan out $90 to other people. Okay, so notice, remember, this is money that Noah puts into a savings account that really he's not going to spend, right? And so what is the bank going to do? Well, they can loan this out to new people. All right, so round two, the second bank, okay, they loan this money out. Okay, they're going to use that $90 to buy something, whatever that is. When they buy that 90, when they buy that amount of money, they buy that product, sorry. Okay, somebody's going to take that money eventually and put it into a bank. Okay, so if I buy, let's just say, a washing machine, okay, I don't know if you need to take a loan to buy a washing machine from a garage sale at $90, whatever. Their numbers are real low. But if I take that money, that person that I buy it from is going to take that $90 and put it into the bank. Well, this new bank has to keep $9 in reserves, but they can loan out another 81, right? So now person three is going to come in and they're going to borrow $81. They're going to buy something for $81. Okay. Well, that person that sells something for $81, they're going to put it in a bank. The bank's going to have to hold on to $8.10. They're going to be able to loan out $72.90. And we can go on and on and on. Obviously, that initial deposit of $90, I'm sorry, $100, initial loan of $90, right, turns into money for all sorts of people. Okay. So how much new money is created is the question that we are trying to answer. Okay. So the way that we do it, all right, is we take one, and it's extremely similar back to our spending multiplier where it was 1 over the marginal propensity to save. Okay. This is 1 over the reserve requirement. Okay, so I kind of give you that here. I write it in that form. All right, but 1 over the reserve requirement. So the formula is not too difficult to remember. Okay, if you wanted to really tie it in, you can say, okay, 1 over marginal propensity to save, 1 over reserve requirement. What is the bank required to save? I don't know. You could play around with some wording there if you wanted to try to just remember this formula, but it's pretty straightforward. It's 1 over the reserve requirement. Okay. So in this case, the money multiplier is, I'm sorry, the reserve requirement is 10%. So we take 1 over 0.1 equals 10. So our money multiplier in this case is 10. All right. We're trying to figure out how much new money is available. And this is M2 money. Remember, M2 money is the money also that's allowed to be loaned out, right? And so that M2 money, that M2 money is available to everybody. All right. The difference between M2 money and M1 money, another difference is M1 money is only the cash on hand. That's not really available to everybody. M2 money is available to everybody that can take out a loan. Okay. Now, here's the tricky part. All right. And I have it kind of color coded down here. Since that $100 was always in the economy, we only apply the multiplier, okay, to the amount of money the bank is allowed to loan. This is a big key, and this is the thing that people miss. All right. In this case, it's $90. Okay. So the reserve requirement is 10. Well, the bank's only allowed to loan out $90. So we got to take the reserve requirement, okay, times our new money allowed to be loaned out, and we're going to get $900. So you've got one more step in there that you've got to kind of remember to keep straight. Which after we practice it a few times, it's going to be pretty straightforward. Okay, so we've got a few practice problems for you here. I already have them written out for you. Okay, so we're going to walk through them. Assume a reserve requirement of 20%. So we've got a new money multiplier here, right? Okay. If someone deposits $500, how much will the money supply increase by? So we've got a new excess, right? So we've got to remember, you've got to apply that money multiplier to the amount of money that's deposited. So back here, we applied that 10% that I hold on to $100. Well, now our reserve requirement is 20%. So we've got to apply that to the $500, right? So now we only have $400. Our money multiplier is 5. Our answer here is 2,000. Okay. I kind of go through, obviously, through a few different problems. What's 20% out of 2,000? Well, that's 400. So I only can loan out 1,600. 1,600 times 5, 8,000. New multiplier, new numbers. Again, this is 10%. I've got to find 90% of 500, right? I usually take 10% out of the existing. That's how my brain works. So 450 times 10 equals 4,500. last but not least, 10% out of here is 1,800 times 10. We have 18,000. Okay, so you've got a little bit of a step in there that you've got to keep track of. But if you can wrap your head around it, I would say at least 3 or 4 questions on the AP exam are going to revolve around this particular concept. All right. All right. Now, remember, when the Fed buys bonds, different things are going on. Okay. So when the Federal Reserve buys bonds, right, what that's doing is it's not necessarily taking away from the reserve requirements from a bank. All right. So if a bank, okay, so our bank here, let's just say our bank has 10 grand total. Okay. So 10,000 total, and they decide to the Fed decides to sell bonds. So we're just going to say that the bank puts 2,000 in here, okay, to the Fed. And we talk about this process a little bit more later on. But here's what you've got to understand. So now the bank, let's call it 10% here. Okay. So the bank can loan out 9,000. All right, except for, notice the Fed over here, they took out 2,000. Okay, so our required, we'll just write down here for the sake of it, is 1,000. Okay, so the Fed over here, things are a little bit different because now they can loan out 9,000, but the Fed, it's hidden in the Federal Reserve, so to speak. It's out. Now they can only loan out really, due to that, like $7,000. Okay, which not really super important to know. Okay, but just know that they cannot loan this money out over here. Okay, so when the Fed buys back the bonds, meaning that the money goes back into the bank, okay, that's money the bank could have loaned out anyway. We don't have to apply the the reserve requirement to that. Okay, now in this case, the Federal Reserve, the question becomes, if the Fed buys $500 billion worth of bonds, how much money does that create? Assume a 10% reserve requirement. We need this number to get our multiplier, which our multiplier equals 10. Okay, so we buy 500 billion worth of bonds times 10. That's going to equal 5 trillion in this case number. Okay, because that money was never necessarily not allowed to be loaned. It was just being held on to by the Federal Reserve. Okay, a little bit tricky, probably good for maybe 1, 2 points at the very, very most on the AP exam. We're going to know how to do it. The trick is remembering it, obviously, when you take the test. Okay, so I've got a little bit of a table here for you to kind of remember that. Okay, so over here is the Fed. That's the trickier one, probably because we talked about the private customer deposit first. All right, and again, none of us have had experience with selling and buying bonds from the Federal Reserve, so we really aren't familiar with the exact process. Okay, it's just a way for the bank to try to increase some of its equity and get some interest payments back from the Fed, just like you and I would invest in a savings bond or some type of government deposit. Okay, so again, that money from the Fed was never in circulation. Remember, it was in circulation before with a person. Okay, they could have spent it as well. All right, just a little chart for you. Again, the multiplier stays the same. I just don't have to chunk out that. I just don't have to chunk out that initial reserve requirement. I don't have to take that out with the Federal Reserve. Okay, so notice when I'm showing you, you can copy that chart down if you'd like. Again, everything is the same as you go across here, right? As they're doing what they're doing, and you can just see the small difference there. Okay, next time we'll talk about banking transactions. Have a good day. Don't be afraid to email me with questions. Don't be afraid to access my AP. There's some videos on some of this stuff. Sometimes there's a little bit more clarity. Sometimes they're super slow. But everybody reacts a little bit different. So if you need to do that, by all means, do it. If you need to ask me questions, ask me questions. Keep keeping up with the my AP stuff. It's going to pay off in the long run. Have a great day. Talk soon.